My name is Rachel Morgan. In the dim glow of a one-bedroom apartment in Austin, Texas, I built a multi-million-dollar tech company from nothing but a laptop and a stubborn dream. Night after night, I coded until my fingers ached, the keys worn smooth under my touch. I lived on coffee that grew cold, missed birthdays that blurred into years, and traded sleep for lines of code that promised a future I could barely imagine. I didn't just survive those nights, I carved something real out of them, something mine. But then, the people I loved most tried to take it all away. Not a rival, not a stranger, my own mother, my sister, Lauren, the ones who were supposed to hold me closest. In public, they wore proud smiles, boasting of my success to anyone who'd listen. But behind closed doors, their words cut deeper than silence. "You got lucky," they'd say, their voices dripping with dismissal. My work, my sleepless nights, my sacrifices, they called it chance. And when the money came, when my dream turned into something they could touch, they didn't come to celebrate. They came to claim it. A third of everything I'd built, they said, as if my success was a debt I owed them. It sounds unthinkable, doesn't it? If I hadn't lived it, I might not believe it myself. But here's the truth I learned. Betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from the people who shaped you, the ones who were supposed to lift you up. This story is for anyone who's ever felt like a stranger in their own family, for anyone who's wondered if love is something you have to earn, only to find the rules keep changing. I know that ache. I was the daughter who followed every rule, the quiet one who never made waves. Meanwhile, Lauren was the golden child, the one my mother's eyes always found first. Lauren needs us more, my mother once told me, her words soft but heavy. I thought it was a compliment, a nod to my strength. It wasn't. It was a quiet exile, a sentence to be unseen. This isn't a story of tears. It's a story of survival. It's about learning where to draw the line, about healing from wounds you didn't choose, and about discovering that love, real love, doesn't demand you shrink to fit its mold. My story led me to a courtroom, yes, but it began long before that, on the snow-dusted streets of Denver, Colorado. That's where I first learned what it means to be the strong one, and how strength can feel like invisibility. Sometimes the price of building a future you believe in is letting go of the family that never saw you for who you are. And as I stood in that courtroom, facing the people I once called home, I realized something. My dream wasn't just mine to build, it was mine to protect. I grew up on the edge of Denver, in a neighborhood where every house wore the same face, modest, two-story homes with sloping roofs, picket fences, and shutters that begged for a fresh coat of paint. Ours were blue, chipped and weathered, but my mother called them full of character. In winter, snow draped the streets like a postcard, soft and silent. But inside our house, the air carried a different kind of chill, one that settled in my bones and never quite left. I was the firstborn, the quiet one, the easy child, as my mother liked to say. I learned early to fold myself small, to need little, to keep the peace. Then came Lauren, 5 years later, and with her arrival, the faint warmth of attention I'd known flickered out like a candle in the wind. Lauren was a burst of light, big blue eyes, a dimpled laugh that could charm the stars. She was given ballet lessons at 4, a pink bedroom painted with care, a suitcase adorned with cartoon princesses for our family's first vacation. I shared my room with laundry baskets and a promise of next year that never arrived. It wasn't just one moment. It was a rhythm, a pattern woven into our lives. Lauren's spring breaks meant Disney World. Her closet overflowed with tutus and glitter-dusted shoes. I got clearance rack jeans and trips to Aunt Debbie's because Rachel understands Lauren needs these moments while she's young. When I asked why, the answer was always the same, soft but sharp. "We're just being practical, Rachel." Or worse, "Lauren's particular about her clothes. You've never minded." as if my silence meant I didn't feel the weight of being overlooked. But I saw everything. I saw how Lauren's dance recitals were grand affairs. Mom taking off work, her hair swept up, a bouquet of flowers in her hands. My honor roll certificate in 5th grade, a quick, "That's great, kiddo," from Dad before he turned back to the evening news. The fridge was Lauren's gallery. Her crayon drawings, her ribbons, her smiling face framed in trophies and tiaras. My one spelling bee certificate sat crumpled in a corner, half hidden behind a pizza coupon. I tried to be seen. I joined the soccer team, though every sprint felt like a betrayal of my own lungs. I built a science fair project, poured my heart into a poem that won a statewide contest. My parents came to the ceremony, but left early for Lauren's ballet rehearsal. It was the little things that cut deepest. The way Mom's voice softened when she said Lauren's name, like a prayer. The way Dad's eyes lit up when Lauren entered a room, as if she carried the sun. Me, I was the steady one, dependable, invisible. Being the easy child teaches you a strange lesson. People assume you're always fine, that you don't need more because you've learned to live with less. Over time, you stop asking, you stop hoping, you shrink bit by bit until being unseen feels like home, safe, almost. But it's a hollow kind of safety, the kind that leaves you wondering if you're even real. Yet there was one person who saw me, really saw me, my grandmother, Ellie. Her little house an hour away was a sanctuary of rose bushes and wind chimes that sang in the breeze. When I stepped through her door, I wasn't the other daughter. I was Rachel, the girl who asked endless questions, who devoured books, who dreamed of worlds beyond the snow-lined streets. Over cups of tea in her kitchen, she'd listen, her eyes bright with knowing. "You're building something inside, Rachel," she'd say, her voice steady as the earth. I didn't understand her words then, but they took root in me, a quiet hunger to prove I was more than the shadow I'd been assigned. That hunger stayed with me, smoldering, waiting. It wasn't until years later, after Grandma Ellie was gone, that it sparked into something real, something I could build with my own 2 hands. That's when my story truly began. In a world where I often felt like a shadow, there was one person who saw me in full color. My grandmother, Ellie Morgan. She wasn't the storybook grandma with cookies and knitted scarves. No, Grandma Ellie was a force, sharp-witted, unyielding, with eyes that seemed to solve you like a puzzle she was determined to understand. Her floral shop, Ellie's Garden, sat in the heart of Littleton, a haven of eucalyptus and lilies, where the bell above the door chimed like it was welcoming you home. From the time I was 11, that shop was my refuge, the one place where I wasn't an afterthought. I'd trail behind her, watering plants, tying ribbons, riding along in her old truck to deliver bouquets. We brought flowers to weddings that sparkled with hope, to hospitals heavy with grief, to funerals where silence spoke louder than words. "Flowers don't just decorate, Rachel," she'd say, her voice steady as she clipped stems. "They speak when hearts can't. They say, 'I love you,' or 'I'm sorry,' or sometimes just, 'I see you.'" Those words wrapped around me like a blanket, warming the parts of me my family left cold. One rainy afternoon, after delivering a bouquet to a woman in hospice, I asked her why she poured so much care into things that would fade. She paused, her hands still in the soil, and looked out at the rain streaking the windshield. "Because their fleeting beauty is what makes them matter," she said. "Nothing lasts forever, Rachel. That's why we notice it. That's why we make it count." Her words sank into me, like seeds waiting for the right season to grow. But the moment that changed everything came one summer when I was 13. We'd just finished arranging 12 centerpieces for a fundraiser, my hands sticky with sap, my heart heavy with the weight of feeling out of place. I let the words slip out, barely a whisper. "Sometimes I feel like I don't belong anywhere." Grandma Ellie stopped, peeled off her gardening gloves, and fixed her gaze on me, fierce and tender all at once. "Rachel," she said, "sometimes the world forgets to plant you, but that doesn't mean you can't bloom. Bloom anyway, bloom where they forgot you. Those words cracked open a door inside me, letting in a light I didn't know I could hold. In that shop, under the hum of ceiling fans and the scent of freesia, she taught me more than how to arrange flowers. She showed me the rhythm of business, how to charm customers, balance budgets, negotiate with vendors. She spoke of overhead and margins with the same passion she used for roses. I didn't know it then, but she was laying the foundation for a dream I hadn't yet dared to name. She kept a maroon leather journal by the register, its pages filled with quotes, reflections, lessons from each day. "You don't need an audience to be worth remembering," she'd tell me. "Write for yourself. That's enough." When I left for college, she pulled me into a hug and whispered, "Don't be afraid to outgrow those who refuse to water you." I carried those words like a compass, even as their meaning only became clear later. Her death came without warning, a stroke stealing her away during my senior year. One day, she was texting me photos of a new rose hybrid. The next, she was gone. At her funeral, I stood alone, feeling like the only adult who ever truly saw me had slipped through my fingers. 2 weeks later, her attorney called. She'd left me $10,000, a small stack of her favorite business books, and that maroon journal. "She said you'd know what to do with them when the time was right," he told me. He was right. I didn't know it then, but those gifts would become the roots of something extraordinary, something Grandma Ellie would have smiled to see bloom. By 18, I knew two truths as surely as my own heartbeat. I couldn't stay in a house that felt like a cage, and I was done chasing a finish line that kept slipping out of reach. So when the University of Texas at Austin opened its doors to me, I packed my worn-out suitcase, hugged Grandma Ellie until my chest ached, and left Denver's snow-dusted streets behind, like shedding a skin that no longer fit. College was a rush of fresh air, a place where the weight of my family's indifference couldn't follow. The campus buzzed with life, students laughing, ideas colliding, no one asking why I grew quiet when family came up in conversation. I chose business with a focus on entrepreneurship, not because I had a map, but because something deep inside me yearned to build a life, a legacy, something that was mine. I didn't know what shape it would take, but I felt its pulse, faint but persistent. Every Sunday, I'd call Grandma Ellie. Her voice was my anchor, steady through the chaos of midterms and late-night study sessions. She'd send care packages, tea bags, a book, a tiny potted plant with a note tucked inside. Even windowsills bloom with the right light. Those words were a reminder that I was seen, that I mattered, in a way my family never made me feel. Then, in my final year, during the blur of midterm week, a call shattered everything. A stroke. No warning. No chance to say goodbye. Grandma Ellie was gone, and the world felt quieter, emptier, like a room with the lights turned out. I stared at my phone, willing it to hum with one last message, one last "I see you" from the woman who always did. At her funeral, I stood at the back, a stranger among familiar faces. My mother's expression was more irritation than grief. Lauren's sobs rang loud and performative, though she'd barely visited Grandma in years. I was alone with my loss, the silence she left behind heavier than anything I'd ever carried. 2 weeks later, a manila envelope arrived at my dorm. Inside were Grandma Ellie's gifts: $10,000, a small stack of her favorite business books, and her maroon leather journal, its pages worn from years of her thoughts. Tucked among them was a note, her cursive looping across a small white envelope. I sat on the cold dorm floor, knees drawn up, still in yesterday's hoodie, and read her words. "For the granddaughter who dared to be more. This is your seed money. Not just for a business, but for your courage. Build something they can't take from you. Never let anyone dim the light you were born with." Her words were oxygen, filling the hollow spaces my family had carved. I held that letter, tears blurring the ink, and felt something shift, a spark of permission to believe in myself. I called home, naive enough to think they'd share in the moment. My mother's voice was sharp, clipped. 10,000? That's a mistake. That money should have gone to Lauren. She's starting a family. Her words landed like a slap, as if Grandma's choice was an insult, as if I'd stolen something that wasn't mine. Be reasonable, Rachel. You're young. You'll have other chances. But Grandma Ellie chose me, and for once, I wasn't sorry for it. She knew what she was doing, I said, and hung up. That $10,000 wasn't just money. It was a promise, a validation of the worth my family never saw. The journal was her voice, alive on every page. Business tips, dreams, warnings. On the first page, she'd written, "They'll tell you you need their permission. You don't. Build it anyway." Those words lit a fire in me. I didn't know yet what I'd build, but in the corner of a coffee-stained notebook, a scribbled idea was taking root, watered by late nights, Grandma's belief, and a quiet hunger to prove I was enough. That's when the world began to tilt, when my story started to become my own. Graduation came and went without fanfare. No balloons, no family toasts, no proud words about my future. My parents didn't make the ceremony. Lauren's baby shower was that weekend, and it held their attention like always. So I boarded a bus back to Austin, my diploma tucked in my backpack, $10,000 in my bank account, and Grandma Ellie's voice echoing in my heart. Build something they can't take from you. I settled into a cramped apartment above a bakery, where the scent of fresh bread mingled with the creak of uneven floorboards. The heater sputtered, the walls were thin, but it was mine, a small corner of the world where I could finally breathe. By day, I worked at a marketing agency, churning out ad copy and cold emails for realtors, a job that paid the bills but left my soul restless. At night, though, in the quiet hours, I came alive. In sweatpants, with a flickering desk lamp and a second-hand laptop that hummed like it was as tired as I was, I poured myself into a dream. It started as a spark, born from watching friends, photographers, designers, editors, drown in the chaos of freelance life. They were brilliant creators, but their days were tangled in messy spreadsheets, missed deadlines, and clunky apps that cost too much or did too little. I imagined something better. A platform called Lightboard, simple and sleek, built for creatives like us. A place to track projects, schedule clients, manage invoices, all without the bloat or the price tag. A tool to keep their work lit, organized, alive. I wasn't a coder by trade. What I knew came from late-night YouTube tutorials and online courses I could barely afford. But I had grit, a vision, and Grandma Ellie's journal open beside me, its pages whispering, "Don't wait for permission." So I coded until the early hours, building and breaking and rebuilding. I forgot meals, lost friends to unanswered texts, fell asleep with lines of code glowing on my screen. Some nights, exhaustion made the room spin, but I kept going, fueled by a stubborn belief that this could be something real. After 6 months, I had a prototype, not polished but functional. I sent beta invites to a few creators from work. 5 signed up. 3 offered kind feedback. 2 ripped it apart. 1 email stung like a blade. Clunky, confusing. It crashed my browser twice. Don't contact me again. He wasn't wrong. Days later, I opened Lightboard on my own laptop, and it froze, the screen mocking me with its stillness. Hours of debugging led nowhere. By 4 a.m., I was on my bathroom floor, the cold tile biting through my hoodie, tears falling as I whispered, "Maybe Mom was right. Maybe I'm not enough." In that dark moment, I believed it. But then, like a flicker of light through a storm, I stumbled on a podcast I'd saved weeks before, Build from Nothing, hosted by Danielle Rhodes, a former venture capitalist who'd backed countless dreamers like me. Her voice filled the room, raw and real, speaking of her own failures, her first company's collapse, the mistakes, the broken pieces that paved the way for something stronger. If your first version doesn't suck a little, she said, you waited too long to launch. I played those words again, then again, letting them sink into my bones. Sitting there, eyes burning, I found her email buried on her website, under a line that dared, "Cold pitches welcome, if you've got grit." So I wrote to her, not with polish, but with truth. I told her about the late nights, the ramen dinners, the dream born from Grandma Ellie's $10,000, and a lifetime of being unseen. I attached a screenshot of Lightboard and ended with, "It's not perfect, but it's needed. I just need someone to show me how to make it better." I didn't expect an answer, but 2 days later, my inbox lit up with her reply. Danielle's email arrived like a spark in the dark. 5 words that changed everything. "Let's talk over coffee, Tuesday?" That simple invocation cracked open a door I hadn't dared to knock on. We met at a small cafe near Austin's capital, the air thick with the scent of espresso and possibility. I was a bundle of nerves, second-guessing my outfit, but Danielle strolled in wearing sneakers and a hoodie, her presence as unpretentious as her black coffee. She looked me in the eye and said, "You've got the bones, Rachel, but you're dreaming too small." For an hour, she dissected my work, not to tear it down, but to build it stronger. Her questions were sharp, her advice sharper, and by the time I left, my notepad was a mess of ideas, my mind alive with a fire I hadn't felt before. 2 weeks later, her email came again. She wanted to invest. A modest seed round, but it was enough. Enough to fix Lightboard's broken code, polish its clunky edges, and hire a freelance developer who knew more than my YouTube tutorials ever could. Together, we rebuilt Lightboard from its shaky foundations. This time, it didn't crash. This time, it sang. Within a month, we landed our first real client, a chain of co-working spaces needing a tool to manage their freelance creatives. They saw what I saw in Lightboard. They paid for it. And when that first payment hit my account, I stared at the numbers, not because of their size, but because they were proof. Someone believed in what I'd built. I quit my marketing job the next week. I moved Lightboard into a tiny office, 2 rooms above a yoga studio, furnished with secondhand desks. I hauled in a borrowed grocery cart. My developer and I celebrated with takeout and cheap wine, toasting to a dream that was finally real. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Despite everything, a part of me still reached back. I sent flowers to my mom for her birthday, a new stroller to Lauren for her growing family, even branded Lightboard mugs to my parents with a note to my dad, "I'm doing okay." I wanted them to see me, to say they were proud, to notice the woman I was becoming. But when my mom called, her voice was cold, flat. "Glad you're finally doing something productive," she said, as if my years of coding, doubting, and dreaming were invisible until they bore fruit. Lauren's laugh cut deeper, sharp over the phone. "Guess I should have moved into a shoebox and given up my life for attention." Her words stung, not because they were true, but because they echoed the doubts I'd fought so hard to silence. I hadn't sacrificed sleep, friendships, and comfort for their approval. I'd done it for freedom. That call left me hollow. Staring at my reflection in the office window, I realized they'd never see me, not the way I needed. So I stopped trying. No more updates, no more tagged posts. I let their silence speak, and I answered with boundaries, each one a brick in a wall I hadn't wanted to build. But the ache lingered, a quiet pulse beneath my success. Lightboard grew, more users, more revenue, a team of 5. And yet, I longed for someone to call when milestones hit, someone to say, "I knew you could do it," someone like Grandma Ellie. But she was gone, and my family didn't care. Then, on my 28th birthday, a letter arrived, official, certified, stamped with my parents' address. My heart leapt, foolishly hoping for a turning point, a sign they'd remembered me. I tore it open, expecting warmth, maybe even love. Instead, I found betrayal, cold and sharp in black ink and legal terms, a wound that cut deeper than silence ever could. I hadn't sacrificed sleep, friendships, and comfort for their approval. I'd done it for freedom. That call left me hollow. Staring at my reflection in the office window, I realized they'd never see me, not the way I needed. So I stopped trying. No more updates, no more tagged posts. I let their silence speak, and I answered with boundaries, each one a brick in a wall I hadn't wanted to build. But the ache lingered, a quiet pulse beneath my success. Lightboard grew, more users, more revenue, a team of 5. And yet, I longed for someone to call when milestones hit, someone to say, I knew you could do it. Someone like Grandma Ellie. But she was gone, and my family didn't care. Then, on my 28th birthday, a letter arrived. Official, certified, stamped with my parents' address. My heart leapt, foolishly hoping for a turning point, a sign they'd remembered me. I tore it open, expecting warmth, maybe even love. Instead, I found betrayal, cold and sharp in black ink and legal terms, a wound that cut deeper than silence ever could. My 28th birthday arrived on a golden autumn evening in Austin, the kind where the air was crisp and the city glowed like a painting. My friends surprised me with dinner at a cozy bistro downtown, its patio strung with fairy lights, handwritten menus tucked between plates of shared appetizers. We laughed over stories that danced free of work or family, clinked glasses of wine, and for a few precious hours, I felt whole, held by people who chose me, not out of duty, but out of love. Someone brought a small chocolate cake, a single candle flickering at its heart. I closed my eyes before blowing it out, and for the first time in years, I didn't wish for anything. I was enough, just as I was. When I got home, cheeks still warm from laughter and wine, I kicked off my shoes and tossed my purse onto the couch. That's when I saw it. A certified envelope leaning against my door, stark and out of place, like a shadow in the sunlight. My stomach sank when I read the return address. Patricia and Daniel Morgan, my parents. No card, no birthday note, just the cold weight of a legal document on a day meant for celebration. I sat at my kitchen table, the envelope seal cracking under my trembling fingers, as if it might unravel me too. It did. The letter was typed, clinical, signed in my mother's tight cursive. No "Dear Rachel," no "Happy Birthday." It began, "After careful consideration, your father and I have updated our estate plan. All assets, property, accounts will pass to Lauren. She's building a family and needs our support." Then the words that cut like glass. "You've built your own life, Rachel. It's only fair we support the child who needs us most." It ended with a single sterile line, "Regards, Patricia Morgan." Not "Love, Mom," not even sincerely, just "Regards," like I was a stranger. I read it 3 times, the paper trembling in my hands, waiting for the words to shift, for some hidden meaning to soften the blow. But there was none. This was deliberate, timed to land on my birthday, a day I'd dared to feel seen. The room grew quiet, the hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, even my own breath faded into a hollow stillness. I'd never expected grand gestures from them, not anymore. I'd stopped hoping for calls or cards years ago. But some small part of me, buried deep, had believed there were lines even they wouldn't cross, that cruelty had limits. I was wrong. I reached for Grandma Ellie's journal on the shelf, not to read, but to hold. Its worn leather a tether to someone who'd once seen me. Tears came then, not loud or angry, but quiet, steady, like rain on a window. I wasn't sobbing, I was empty, carved out by the realization that my family hadn't just overlooked me, they'd erased me, written me out of their story as if I'd never been part of it. I thought about calling, about screaming or begging for answers, demanding why they thought I'd accept this. But their words echoed. There is no need to respond. For once, I agreed. I set the phone down, let the silence settle, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not hope, but a quiet resolve. They could take me out of their will, but they couldn't take what I've built, what Grandma Ellie had seen in me. Her journal, her belief, her voice, they were still mine. And in that moment, I knew I'd keep building. Not for their approval, but for the girl who'd learned to bloom where she was never planted. A month had passed since the letter, those cold, calculated words that stripped me from my family story on my 28th birthday. I was learning to carry the ache, tucking it away like a bruise beneath my skin, and throwing myself into Lightboard. We'd just sealed a partnership with a content agency in Chicago, a milestone that felt like a pulse of hope. I was onboarding 2 new developers, training a customer support lead, watching my dream take root in the world. Life was moving forward, steady, alive, until they arrived. It was a Wednesday afternoon, the air sharp with the promise of fall. I'd just returned to my office, coffee in hand, when I saw them outside the building, standing like ghosts from a life I'd tried to leave behind. My mother, Patricia, in her Sunday church dress, heels unsteady on the cracked pavement. Lauren, arms crossed, her scowl as familiar as ever. And Brian, her husband, looming behind them, his smugness like a salesman ready to close a deal. They looked wrong here, out of place against the hum of code and creativity that was my world now. I could have turned away, pretended I didn't see them, but my mother's voice cut through the air. "Rachel," she said, all formality, no warmth, "we need to talk." My instinct screamed to run, but I led them to a small meeting room down the hall, neutral ground, no trace of the life I'd built. I didn't offer coffee, I didn't smile. I sat, and the masks they wore fell away. Brian spoke first, his voice rehearsed oily. "You've made a lot of money, Rachel. It's only fair you share it." I blinked, the words landing like a misfired arrow. "Excuse me?" Lauren leaned forward, her eyes hard. "You owe us a third of the sale," she said, as if claiming a birthright. I laughed, not out of joy, but from the sheer absurdity of it, the audacity that left me breathless. "Why would I owe you anything?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. That's when my mother reached into her purse and pulled out a yellowed, creased page torn from a journal I'd kept in college. My heart sank as I recognized my own handwriting, a fleeting, private wish scribbled in a sleepless moment. If this idea works, maybe I can help Mom and Lauren. Maybe I can give them something back. She slid it across the table like evidence in a trial. "This is a promise," she said, her voice cold as the letter she'd sent. "We supported you for years, emotionally, financially." Emotionally? The word escaped me, sharp and incredulous. "You sent me a certified letter on my birthday telling me I was nothing to you, that everything you had would go to Lauren." Brian cut in, his tone slick with false civility. "We don't want to fight, Rachel, but if you don't share what's rightfully ours, we'll take legal action." There it was, the threat, naked and unashamed, from the family that had already written me out. I stared at them, time stretching thin. Then, with a calm I didn't know I had, I pulled out my phone, dialed my lawyer, and put her on speaker. "Lisa, I need to file a response to a family extortion attempt. They're here, threatening to sue over my company based on a journal entry from college." Lisa's voice came through, clear and unflinching. "Rachel, don't acknowledge anything further. Their claim has no legal standing. Ask them to direct all communication through our office." I looked at them, Brian's confidence faltering, Lauren's face paling, my mother shrinking, as if seeing her own story unravel. "You heard her," I said, standing. "Talk to my lawyer. You know the way out." They left without a word, the door clicking shut like a final note. But as their footsteps faded, a weight settled over me, not just the sting of their greed, but the truth that they weren't just excluding me. They were trying to take what I'd bled to build, what Grandma Ellie's belief had sparked. They didn't know. I'd spent a lifetime preparing for this kind of betrayal, forging resilience in the shadow of their indifference. They wouldn't win. I'd keep building, not for them, but for the girl who'd learned to bloom where no one thought she could. Betrayal in private cuts deep, but facing the people who raised you in a courtroom, Watching them try to rewrite your life before a judge is a wound that echoes. The hearing unfolded in a modest courthouse just outside Austin. No grand pillars, no flashing lights, just worn carpet, buzzing fluorescents, and a judge with weary eyes clutching a clipboard. Yet, for me, it was like stepping into the heart of everything I'd spent years running from, the shadow of a family that never saw me. My mother and Lauren sat across the room, dressed as if for a solemn holiday, their faces a mask of righteousness. Brian lingered behind, arms crossed, playing the part of a man who thought he'd already won. Their attorney began with a polished story, weaving a tale of a devoted family who'd nurtured Rachel through college, championed her dreams, and now sought fair acknowledgement for their sacrifices. Then came their so-called evidence, that yellowed page torn from my college journal, a fleeting wish to help them twisted into a binding vow. He spoke of fabricated conversations, promises I'd supposedly made over holiday dinners I was never invited to. My mother took the stand, her voice trembling with rehearsed tears. "We just want what she promised. We gave her so much." I didn't flinch. I held their gaze, anchored by a truth they couldn't rewrite. When our turn came, my lawyer, Lisa, stood with a quiet fire. She laid out the reality of Lightboard's birth, Grandma Ellie's $10,000 inheritance, Danielle Rhodes' seed investment, the cold pitch email that started it all. She showed call logs, bank statements, and a letter from Danielle endorsing my vision. Then she shared my story, not just a scribbled line, but the weight of it. The sleepless nights, the failed beta, the code I broke and rebuilt, the dream that grew from grit. Lisa's voice was steady as she closed. Rachel built this on her own, not on guilt. The courtroom fell silent, the air heavy with truth. The judge leaned forward, her eyes scanning the documents, then fixed on my mother. "Mrs. Morgan," she said, her voice cutting through the pretense, "there is no legal basis for your claim, no contract, verbal or otherwise. What I see is a pattern of manipulation toward someone you chose not to support until her success served you." Then she turned to me, her gaze softening. "Ms. Morgan, you owe no one for the dream they refused to believe in." The gavel fell, sharp and final. The case was dismissed. It should have felt like triumph, but instead, a hollow ache settled in my chest. This wasn't just a legal victory. It was proof that my family didn't just overlook me, they saw me only as something to claim. I chose not to strike back. No press, no bitter emails, just boundaries drawn like lines in stone. But I did one last thing. I set up education trust funds for Lauren's twins. College tuition only, managed by a neutral firm, untouchable by greed. Not for her, but for those children, innocent in this tangle of hurt. And for me too, to prove I could rise above bitterness, to build a future defined by truth, not resentment. As I told Lisa later, standing outside the courthouse, the Austin sky wide and unyielding, you can't buy forgiveness with guilt, but you can build freedom with boundaries. In that moment, I felt Grandma Ellie's voice, soft but steady, urging me to keep going, to bloom where no one thought I could. A few months after the courtroom fell silent, I found myself in my Austin backyard on a quiet evening, hosting a simple dinner under a sky scattered with stars. No banners, no speeches, just close friends, their laughter weaving through soft music and the glow of string lights I'd hung across the fence. The air was sweet with jasmine and herbs from a garden I'd planted, a quiet promise to root myself in a life I'd fought for. I slipped away from the chatter, wineglass in hand, and sat beneath the lights, Grandma Ellie's maroon journal open in my lap. I hadn't written in it for weeks, not because my heart was empty, but because I'd been too busy living the life she'd always seen in me, one built on purpose, surrounded by people who chose me for who I was, not what I could give. I turned to a page I'd read 100 times, her words steady as ever. "Grow something good, even in hard soil." That night, they landed differently. like a seed finally breaking through. I'd done it, not just built Lightboard, but a life, strong, beautiful, mine. A life that didn't need permission or apologies. That moment brought clarity. With part of the money from Lightboard's acquisition, I launched the Ellie Bloom Initiative, a grant and mentorship program for young women like me, overlooked, underestimated, with no wealth or safety nets, only fire and dreams. Women who carried visions too big for the small spaces they'd been given. We began small, one scholarship, one founder, one spark. But the impact was real. In every application, I saw my own hunger, my own doubts, my own grit. Helping them wasn't just giving back, it was healing, stitching together the parts of me my family had torn apart. I wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. I was choosing myself and offering that same gift to others. If this story speaks to you, I want you to know, you don't need to prove your worth to those who never saw it. Not to the parent who withheld love, the sibling who turned your success into their resentment, or the voices whispering, "You're not enough." You are, right now, exactly as you are. You don't have to shrink to fit someone else's idea of family. You can build your own, rooted in respect, safety, and love that asks nothing in return. If my story resonates, hit that like button. It means the world to keep this message alive. And if you've ever felt invisible, erased by those who should have loved you, share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters, and you're not alone. Subscribe and join us, because this channel is for you, for the girl who stayed silent too long, the boy who became his own shield, the adult still mending childhood wounds. You deserve love, without conditions, a life you shape on your own terms. My family tried to take what I'd built, but they couldn't touch what Grandma Ellie gave me, the courage to bloom where I was never planted. Thank you for hearing my story. If it's helped you feel even a little less invisible, then it's worth every word. Like, comment, subscribe. Let's keep this conversation going, because your story deserves to be heard too.